We'll get started in a minute. All right, it's 4 o'clock. We'll go.
Okay.
As I just said, my name is Peggy Shaw, and I'm here with Nancy Fitzpatrick. As I mentioned, we're the co-managers of the TAG program. I'll go ahead and share my slides. Okay, I've got a spinning wheel here. What's going on? This worked before.
Okay.
All right, it's telling me it's not responding. Let me just I don't know what's going on here. Okay, here we go. All right. It's being a little funky, but okay, so can everybody see can everybody see the slides?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, there was something odd going on there. I'm looking for, I'm sorry. Make sure I have everything up here. Okay, now we're ready to go. Sorry about that. So anyways, the intro slide, you're at we're at the presentation for the upcoming funding round and that's available through MassDEP's Technical Assistance Grant Program. And as I mentioned, I'm here with Nancy Fitzpatrick to present this. So this is a summary of what we'll be discussing today. First, we'll provide, I'm just going to do something here. I'm just organizing my page here. Okay, so first, we'll provide some background information and the mission of the TAG program. Next, we'll provide details about the funding that will be available for this round. Then we'll describe eligibility requirements, specifically who is eligible to apply for a TAG, where the funding may be used, in other words, which disposal sites are eligible, and finally, what type of projects and activities the grant funding can be used for. We'll then go over the procedures and other logistics associated with the application and award process, including how MassDEP evaluates the applications, what type of information we're looking for in applications. What we won't be discussing today are details about any cleanup work that's taking place at a particular hazardous waste site. And I just want to cover a few standard Zoom logistics. Throughout the presentation, everybody's speakers will be muted. We're a small group, so that's not quite as important as it would be if it was a big group. But we're going to get through we want to get through our presentations. If you have a question during the presentation, please feel free to type it in the chat. There'll also be plenty of time at the end of the presentation to ask questions. This presentation is being recorded. It'll be posted along with the PowerPoint presentation on the TAG webpage. And as you can see in the slide, we're providing the link to the TAG webpage. If you don't want to write all that down, you can just Google MassDEP Technical Assistance Grants, and the link will show up. And I also want to emphasize that this is just an overview of the TAG program. And we encourage you to visit the TAG program webpage, which has more detailed information. So the technical assistance grants are administered by MassDEP's Waste Site Cleanup Program. As you may know, the Waste Site Cleanup Program is responsible for ensuring the timely assessment and cleanup of hazardous waste sites in Massachusetts. And the procedures on how to perform these cleanups are provided in our regulations titled the Massachusetts Contingency Plan, or MCP. So if you heard us using the acronym MCP throughout the presentation, what we're referring to is the regulations that govern the cleanup of hazardous waste sites in the state. An essential component of the site cleanup process is public involvement, and the MCP outlines requirements for public notifications of certain activities or cleanup work being conducted at disposal sites. In addition to these public notification requirements, the MCP also includes specific opportunities for the public to become more involved in this decision-making process of a disposal site cleanup, and tags are one of those mechanisms. You may already be aware that the Waste Site Cleanup Program provides access to disposal site records in an online database that's available to the public, and I'll discuss that in a few minutes. But although these records are easily accessible to the public, many of these documents are very technical in nature, and the TAG program is in part in response to a recognition that many people find it difficult to understand the technical information contained in the plans and reports related to assessment and cleanup at disposal sites. So the basic purpose of tags is to foster public involvement by providing funding to assist groups in obtaining expert technical assistance to help them understand and evaluate disposal site activities, and to enhance public education and public access to that information. And just to emphasize, the TAG funding is limited to public involvement related activities. It may not be used to fund the actual cleanup or assessment at a disposal site. So just a little history. Tags were introduced with the enhanced public involvement procedures that were part of the Waste Site Cleanup Program redesign back in 1993. During the years from 1995 to 2010, we were able to fund 10 rounds, 10 TAG funding rounds. In 2010, tags were put on hold after that last funding round in 2010, primarily due to limitations on resources, both staff resources and the availability of funding that could be earmarked for those purposes. In fiscal year 2022, we were able to bring the TAG program back, and we've offered funding rounds annually since fiscal year 2022. So 4 funding rounds in total since we reintroduced the program. And since reintroducing the TAG program, we have been able to award a total of 20 tags to fund various public involvement projects. For this funding round, the total available funding is anticipated to be $200,000, with individual awards of up to $20,000 per applicant group. And just as a clarification, the grants are available for up to $20,000, but an applicant group may apply for less than $20,000. Likewise, MassDEP has the discretion to award less than $20,000. So, excuse me. So with the total funding amount of $20,000, we could fund 10 awards for $20,000, or we could potentially fund 20 awards for $10,000. I also want to note that this is not a lump sum. When you receive a TAG award, we don't just issue a check for $20,000. Payment will be to reimburse for expenses incurred. So when you incur expenses, you submit an invoice to us, and we reimburse you for eligible expenses. So now we'll get into the eligibility requirements of tags. And I want to reiterate, as we start to discuss the specific requirements and procedures related to tags, these rules are defined in the tag provisions of our regulations, the MCP. And again, this is an overview of the requirements, and we strongly encourage you to take a look at the TAG webpage for more details if you haven't already. There are 3 specific groups who are eligible to apply for a tag. First is groups of individuals, such as community groups. As it states here in this first bullet, this includes existing PIP groups. A PIP group, that's a public involvement plan group. And just to give a quick explanation, As I mentioned previously, the MCP provides specific opportunities to encourage public involvement during the cleanup process, tags being one such opportunity. Another opportunity provided by the MCP for public involvement is through the designation of a site as a public involvement plan site, or a PIP site. How this works is a group of 10 or more citizens in a community petition to have a disposal site designated as a PIP site. Once designated, the person or persons conducting response actions at the site must develop a PIP plan, which is an agreement between them and the public on how they convey information about what's going on at the site with the public, and how the public can comment on activities that are going on at the site. So a group that is already established as a PIP group is eligible to apply for a tag. And since PIP groups are created for the purpose of encouraging and enhancing public involvement at a disposal site, they generally make very good candidates for this type of funding. However, a group does not need to be a PIP group to be eligible to apply for a tag. Also, certain public entities, including municipalities, public water districts, are eligible to apply for tag funding. One of the eligibility requirements, criteria, excuse me, sorry. About to lose my voice. One of the eligibility criteria imposed by our regulations is the requirement that recipients of the tag funding be affected by oil and/or hazardous material from any eligible disposal site. Excuse me. So the applicant needs to show some nexus to the site. However, this requirement is generally interpreted broadly. So if you have an applicant group that's, for example, you have an applicant group that's on the North Shore, we'll say in Newburyport, they want to apply for a tag to fund a project associated with a disposal site in Newburyport or a surrounding community. We're going to assume that they're affected by the disposal site. We're not going to question that. However, if that same group wants to apply for a tag for a disposal site that's located in the Berkshires, they'd have a harder time showing the connection to that site. Who is ineligible? The primary reason why an applicant would be ineligible for a tag is when the group or a member of the group is responsible in some way for the cleanup of the disposal site. So if they are an owner or operator of the disposal site, or they're otherwise responsible in some way for conducting or funding assessment or cleanup work at the site, they would not be eligible to apply. For example, if a disposal site is located on a parcel that's owned by a municipality, that municipality may not apply for a tag for that particular disposal site. Finally, the group must have legal authority to manage grant funds. We already know municipalities have that authority, so this is more directed to our community groups. So the community group would need to have, 501c3 status or some other status recognized by the Secretary of State. But the bottom line is the group needs to have legal capacity to receive, disperse, and be responsible for public grant funds. There's other specific examples of ineligibility, and those details can be found on the TAG program webpage. So which disposal sites are eligible for TAG funding? First of all, the disposal site must be located in the state of Massachusetts. I hope that goes without saying. So beyond the disposal site being located in the state, the MCP defines 3 categories of disposal sites that are eligible for TAG. First, disposal sites that are managed by MassDEP's waste site cleanup program must be tier classified as tier 1 or tier 2. And just a brief explanation of what this means for those who are not familiar with our program. Disposal sites that are managed under the waste site cleanup program and the MCP requirements must tier classify within 1 year of coming into our system. So when I say coming into our system, I mean from the time that the release is reported to us. So a simple spill that can be cleaned up quickly in less than 1 year would not be required to tier classify. So when we're talking about tier classified sites, we're referring to the more complex sites that have been in our system for longer. Also eligible are sites where response actions are considered by the wayside cleanup program to be adequately regulated, meaning that those response actions are being managed by another regulatory program. This would include federal Superfund sites that are on EPA's national priorities list and sites that are being managed by another state-run program, such as the RECRA Hazardous Waste Program or our Solid Waste Program. Excuse me. The rationale for limiting to these categories is that the cleanup work at the disposal site should be at a certain point. So we're looking at sites where a certain level of assessment and data collection has already taken place. So which sites are ineligible? The first bullet here is the inverse of the last slide. If the disposal site is not a tier classified wayside cleanup managed disposal site or a site that where response actions are deemed to be adequately regulated by another regulatory program, then they wouldn't be eligible. In addition, the cleanup work at the disposal site must not have been completed. In this second bullet, we use the term permanent solution. That term is used by MassDEP's wayside cleanup program to denote that the cleanup work has been completed and the site is considered to be closed. But the same rule applies to sites where response actions are conducted by another regulatory program. Sites where no additional assessment or cleanup work is required are not eligible for a tag. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how to find the information on disposal sites in your community. As I already mentioned, the Wayside Cleanup Program maintains its disposal sites in an online database that's accessible to the public. And for those who are not, familiar with this webpage, we wanted to highlight how the site's database can be used in obtaining information about a site in your community. And if you decide to apply for a tag, the information available here will be helpful in completing the tag application. So I'm just going to open this up really quickly. If you open up this link, it brings you to the screenshot is where it will take us. So it comes to, this is on the a wayside cleanup webpage. There's a few things I wanted to point out here. If you're interested in information about the wayside cleanup program, everything you need to know can be found if you click here. As far as the site's database, before I open it up, I wanted to point out under what you need to know, there's a video, there's info and video about how to navigate the site's database. And this is very useful to answer any questions. So I'm just opening this up. There's different ways you can search for sites. A convenient feature is you only have to complete one field. You don't have to complete every field. So if you're interested in all the sites in Amesbury, and this just lists all the sites in our database that are located in Amesbury. A column that's useful to look at is the regulatory status. So if you see PS, any variation of that, PS is permanent solution, so that would not be eligible. Then you have a site here that's tier 2, that would be eligible. Another way to look is you can open up the map. Okay, let's going a little slow today. So if you open up the map, what you're looking for is the sites that are red, because those are the open sites. The green and the blue sites are closed. So, oops. So if you can open up files from here. I'll open up this one just to show you. This is microfab. Supporting documents. And you can pull up a lot of information. This doesn't have as much information because I believe that this is the site is overseen by the EPA to some extent. But going back to the list, whoops. You can click on the RTN. And pull up the supporting documents. And there's all sorts of information that you can access there. I apologize, this is going a little slow for me today. Just trying to go back to the main page. If you have a site in mind and you know the name of it, you can go to, or the address, you can put the address in, or if you know the name of it, I'll do Nyanza. And it pulls up the files for Nyanza. And as you see, that's on the EPA's national priorities list. So, you know, in addition to any files that we have here, which aren't too many, you'd have it's useful to go to where you'd have to go to the EPA's webpage to get the full record. All right, so once you've determined that your group and the disposal site you're interested in are eligible for tag, what can the money be used for? To paraphrase the MCP, the purpose of tags is to provide access to expert advice and technical assistance and to encourage more effective participation in the response action process by promoting access to that information. The most common use of tag funding is to obtain expert advice. And the most common expert hired is a licensed site professional or an LSP. And as you may know, the Waste Site Cleanup Program is a semi-privatized program. And the oversight of most disposal site cleanup is overseen not by MassDEP, but by private sector environmental scientists and engineers who are licensed by the state. And these are these private sector environmental professionals are called licensed site professionals, or LSPs. The expert you hire with the tag funding does not need to be an LSP. It can be any technical expert. It really depends on what the scope of your project is. But in general, the goal of the technical expert is to interpret the technical information and environmental data that you have access to in the site's database and other places potentially, and to assist with the understanding of the content. So depending on the information you wish to interpret or what your goals are, you could hire an LSP or another environmental consultant. You could hire a risk assessor. In a multilingual community, you could use the funding to hire a translator. In some scenarios, although we haven't seen this yet, you could use the funding to hire an attorney to help with public involvement, not to sue anybody, of course. So in addition to hiring a technical expert, tag funds may be used to promote public education and outreach activities. And this could include setting up a web page as an information repository, holding public information meetings, or presenting information at a regularly scheduled town committee meeting or board meeting. So a few things that tag funds may not be used for. Tag funds, as I've already said, tag funds can be used to review and evaluate already existing or developing data, but tag funding may not be used to create new data, either environmental or medical data. Also, as I also mentioned, tag funding may not be used to conduct response actions at a disposal site. It can be used for public involvement, related activities, but not the cleanup, not the actual cleanup work. An attorney may be funded to provide legal advice concerning the public's involvement in the site response actions, but an attorney may not be retained for adversarial purposes. So you can't use tag funding to sue the disposal site owner. Finally, activities funded by the TAG must not interfere with ongoing response actions. So I think in general, a good way to think about it is TAG funding can be used for educational and informational purposes, as opposed to activities that are adversarial in nature. Just to give some examples of how TAG funding can be used, these examples are actual projects that we funded since 2022. For more examples, for more real examples, the summaries of all 20 projects we funded since 2022 are available on the TAG program webpage. The first bullet is an example involving response actions at an adequately regulated landfill. So a landfill that's a site that's being managed by our solid waste program and not the waste site cleanup program. As I mentioned previously, for a disposal site to be eligible, if it's in the waste site cleanup program, it needs to be tier classified, or it needs to be, the response actions need to be being managed by another regulatory program. And we consider that to be adequately regulated. In this particular example, we are dealing with a landfill where response actions are being managed and regulated by our solid waste program, rather than the waste site cleanup program. And it involves a typical TAG project. A community group hired a technical expert to assist with communication between the public and those who are conducting the response actions at this adequately regulated landfill. In the next example, a municipality retained a risk assessor to evaluate a complicated risk assessment and its conclusions relative to public health risks in the community. An important point here is that they conducted this risk assessment using existing data. Recall that I mentioned that tags cannot be used to create new data, but tag funding may be used to evaluate and analyze existing data. The third example was a project implemented by a municipality in a multilingual community. The goal of the overall project was to share information about a particular disposal site with members of the community. And part of that project was to translate information into the various languages spoken by members of the community. And finally, for the last example, we've received inquiries about the extent to which tags can be used in scenarios where PFAS has impacted drinking water supplies. This last example involves a municipality who hired an LSP to assist the town with understanding the complex technical issues related to PFAS contamination that was impacting private drinking water wells, and with assistance to assist them with communicating that information to the public. What makes this project eligible for TAG is that an eligible disposal site was identified and has been established to be the source of the PFAS contamination and the down gradient drinking water wells. Again, our regulations require that there be an eligible disposal site. The private wells themselves are not eligible. They're not eligible disposal sites because although there's been a reportable release in there in our system, they have not been tier classified. So in any scenario where you have contamination in a private well, there needs to be an eligible disposal site that is the cause or contributing to that contamination, and that has to be established and based on data, not just speculation. So we're moving into the application process. And before I turn this over to Nancy, I want to summarize what our timeline is. The first event is the TAG, the pre-TAG information meeting, and we're here. So we would have been on schedule, but we got bumped because of Zoom. But this and just to emphasize, this is an estimated schedule. We don't see any reason why we aren't going to meet the schedule, but we're following state procurement procedures, and not all of it is within our control. So there's a lot of moving parts, but we've always been able to stay, pretty close to the schedule. So hopefully that's the case here. So the next event here is the opportunity and application is scheduled to be released on May 14th. And once the application goes live on May 14th, the formal question and answer period begins. So just a word about that. Until the grant opportunity is released on May 14th, we can speak to you directly about the process, about eligibility requirements, about potential projects you may be considering. Once the opportunity is released and that formal Q&A period begins, we won't be able to respond directly to any questions you have. The way we respond is through a formal official question and answer document that'll be posted on the webpage. So, and this is consistent. This isn't just related to tags. This is consistent with state procurement procedures that are related to publicly funded grants, and we all have to follow this rule. So, which is why we wanted to have this meeting, a month or almost a month in advance, so folks have time to contact us before this Q&A period kicks in. So the Q&A period begins on the same day as the release of the opportunity and application, and that's on May 14th. The deadline for submitting written questions to us is July 11th, and we will post the official answers to all questions received during that time frame on or before July 25th. Next, the grant application deadline is August 29th, so you have all summer to work on this application. Finally, the last two timelines, last two events here, these are very estimated. As I mentioned, the public procurement process is a lot of moving parts, and particularly at the tail end. But these estimates are based on prior experience, so we hope to have similar results as far as these timelines go. So we're estimating the announcement of the grant awards to be in mid-December, and then the estimated contract start dates, that's when you can start your projects, on sometime mid-February. And with that, I will turn this over to Nancy Fitzpatrick.
Thanks, Peggy. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. Now we're going to move on to the TAG application itself. As Peggy just explained, the TAG opportunity and application are expected to be posted on the MassDEP TAG webpage on May 14th. The application is a multi-page fillable Word document, and once it's available, it may be downloaded and completed with the necessary information, and then needs to be submitted electronically via email to MassDEP by the application deadline of the 29th, as Peggy just mentioned. Okay, so here we've provided an example of the first page of the application to show you what it looks like and explain how it's set up. First section asks for specific applicant information, such as the applicant name and address, the identity of the point of contact person, including their email and telephone number, etc. The second section requests information regarding the disposal site, including the disposal site name, if it in fact has a designated name, its address, and the release tracking number. The next sections on the following pages of the application request information specific to eligibility and more technical aspects of the disposal site and the proposed TAG project. So this information includes a description of the disposal site and ongoing response actions, a disposal site map, details regarding activities intended to enhance public involvement, and a project schedule and budget that demonstrates the applicant's ability to successfully manage and complete the proposed project. Next slide, please. Now, moving into the TAG application review process. Once MassDEP has received a TAG application, the first step in our review is to confirm the eligibility of the applicant, the eligibility of the disposal site, and the eligibility of activities proposed in the TAG project. Now, Peggy already discussed these eligibility criteria earlier in the presentation. And just to reiterate, they're all spelled out in the MCP regulation, and they're also listed on the TAG webpage for your reference. Now, after eligibility has been confirmed, the next step involves MassDEP's grant review team reviewing and scoring the application against 8 specific evaluation criteria. Now, the grant review team is composed of MassDEP staff from our Boston and regional offices. And the team's determinations are based on the information and responses provided in the application and how well they are judged to fulfill the evaluation criteria, with a particular focus on achieving the TAG program goals. Next slide, please. Now, I'd like to briefly go through each criterion to give you a sense of the type of information we are looking for as you complete your application, should you choose to proceed. Criterion A, and I will be summarizing a little bit because they're a little wordy, so I'm just going to hit the bolded sections. Criterion A, severity and complexity of the disposal site. Here we're primarily looking for a narrative description of the disposal site that is the subject of your proposed TAG project. This generally should include the disposal site's location and setting, its history of use and activities, both past and present, the type of contamination that has affected the site, including impacted media such as soil, groundwater, surface water, sediment, indoor air, and any potential exposure concerns for sensitive human or environmental receptors. And some examples of such receptors would include a drinking water supply, down gradient of a disposal site, indoor air in a home or a school located above a chlorinated solvent plume associated with a disposal site, or a wetland area that's adjacent to an old industrial disposal site. Criterion B, connection to waste site cleanup goals. This criteria focuses on how well the activities in the proposed TAG project present a cohesive strategy to support greater public participation in and understanding of the disposal site as it moves through assessment and cleanup under the MCP. Now, identifying the site status is very helpful, specifically the phase of the investigation that the site is in, and any remedial measures such as an immediate response actions or release abatement measures that may have taken place that the community may have some questions or concerns about. Criterion C, promote public awareness. Here we look for specific activities directed at educating the public about the existence of the disposal site in their community and the ongoing MCP response actions taking place. Now, some examples of past TAG awarded projects have included holding regular meetings with hired experts such as an LSP or a risk assessor to interpret technical reports and explain them in layman's terms to the community, or distributing educational fact sheets, often in different languages prevalent in the community, and creation of community TAG websites to share information and updates. Next slide, please. Moving on to criterion D, outreach capability. This criterion does overlap a bit with criterion C because it speaks to the applicant's ability to communicate with and engage members of the community. Often this is tied to using established communication tools within the community or local government, which could include websites, information call-in lines, or use of social media sites and posting. Criterion E is implementation potential. Here we often look at the applicant's track record for managing other similar projects effectively and whether they have the dedicated staff, resources, and expertise to accomplish all that the project proposes. Criterion F deals with budget and timeline, and it's focused on whether the information provided in the application indicates a good understanding of how long activities will take to accomplish and how much they will cost. So in other words, do the timelines and the costs appear reasonable, and is it feasible to accomplish activities with the available funds and in the anticipated timeframe of the grant. Next slide, please. Criterion G, benefits and environmental justice community. This asks if the disposal site is located in an EJ, environmental justice community, and if so, you need to identify the community and provide specific examples of how this project is expected to benefit that community. And here on the slide, we've included a link to a list of EJ communities across Massachusetts. I think it's updated regularly, so it should be up to date, current. Lastly, criterion H, benefits in economic target area, or ETA. Now, similar to the EJ criterion, this asks if the disposal site is located in an ETA, and if so, how the project will specifically benefit the area. We recommend that you contact the municipality to determine if this criteria is met. They'll need the disposal site location, and generally they know the areas that qualify for ETA in the designated cities and towns. Next slide, please. So after all the applications have been received and reviewed and scored individually, the grant review team will meet to discuss and determine the awardees. So overall, a successful TAG project will meet all eligibility criteria, fulfill all evaluation criteria to the extent feasible. As I said, if your disposal site is not in an EJ community, or if it's not in an ETA, then obviously you can't fulfill those evaluation criteria. A project that presents a focused mission and clear goals is generally looked upon favorably, and it should be achievable based on the applicant's ability to manage funds and maintain forward progress towards completion within the time frame of the contract. Next slide, please. So the TAG evaluation, okay. This just goes, actually, I think it reemphasizes the deadlines that Peggy already went over, the TAG application process. We expect that the grant opportunity and the application will be posted on the TAG webpage on May 14th. And then all applications and supporting documentation must be submitted electronically to MassDEP by 5 p.m. on Friday, August 29th, to my attention. I think you could send it to Peggy too. Actually, Peggy and I work together, and we generally will CC each other on everything. So it's good to have a couple of people involved. Next slide, please. Just some added information regarding grant award details. One TAG award can be given to one applicant group. So I'm not saying that clearly. An applicant group can apply for and receive one TAG award. One TAG award per disposal site. So one disposal site can only receive one TAG award. A TAG award may be used by one applicant group on a few disposal sites. For instance, if there's 2 or 3 disposal sites in your city or town that you're interested in or have similar questions about, you can use the TAG funds for all of those disposal sites. And the duration of the contract, the contracts will end on June 30th, 2027. The beginning date of the contract really will depend on how long the contracting process goes after we've received all the necessary document signatures. It's gone through internal review and is signed off by MassDEP. Okay, next slide. grant contracts. Now, once the awardees have been decided, then they will be notified by MassDEP and required to complete a number of documents that include the standard Commonwealth standard contract. There's a scope of services agreement that we draw from the TAG application itself, including the proposed activities in the TAG project. There's standard terms and conditions and with every contract with the Commonwealth. There's also a contractor evaluation signatory form that needs to be listed. This form designates people who can sign off on the invoices that are submitted to us for reimbursement of TAG funds. And those people their names have to be clearly listed on that form, and it has to be signed by an official person of the group or municipality receiving the TAG. And in terms of payment, we need to have up-to-date electronic funds transfer form that involves getting a vendor code for each applicant. Sometimes a lot of cities and towns already have vendor codes if they have contracts with the Commonwealth, but we can handle getting you a vendor code if you need one through the electronic funds form, and also a W-9 because you'll be receiving state funding. I think that's it. Next slide, please. Okay, I think Peggy touched on this already, but to be clear, this is a reimbursement grant. After the contract becomes effective, it will run until June 30th, 2027, and activities and expenses incurred during the course of those contract dates that are considered eligible activities under the approved TAG project need to be submitted to us. We review them, and if they're okay, then they're forwarded on through our contracting department for further review and then reimbursement. All groups receiving funds must have legal authority to receive state funding at the time that the grant is awarded. That means that you need to have a federal identification number if your group, or if your group does not have one, then you have to work with the Secretary of State's office to get one. And that's a relatively smooth process. Off the top of my head, I can't tell you exactly how long that takes, but before you're eligible to receive the TAG fundings, we do need that to be completed. Peggy might have something to add with that. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, and again, this is just reiterating something that Peggy's already discussed. There is an official, the question and answer period starts on the day that the grant opportunity and the application are posted on the TAG website. It's anticipated to be May 14th, and it will run until July 11th. During that period, we can receive any written questions via email, and we will respond in writing on the TAG webpage on or before July 25th. As Peggy mentioned, if you have questions before May 14th, you can contact us directly, and we can either email or you can give us a call, and we can discuss questions that you might have regarding the TAG program. Once the application and opportunity is posted, we cannot speak to you directly and answer questions. It all has to be in writing, and that's, as she's clearly stated, that it's a state procurement rule law, and we are not allowed to speak with people aside from that. Okay. Okay. I think we've hammered that. Okay. All right. I think we'll go on to the next slide. If you have questions on it, there's plenty of opportunity. So here's our contact information. My email, Peggy's email, they're pretty similar, and our telephone numbers, and link to our TAG webpage, which I think you're probably all familiar with, or you will get familiar with quickly if you do decide to proceed for a TAG grant. Thank you.
And our contact information is on the webpage as well, the TAG webpage, so you can find the same information there.
Yeah.